Following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is Thursday, May 15th. It is sort of a slow news day. So we're going to talk about Joe Biden's decline, and we're going to talk about the true story about Joe Biden, how he was elected and some say not elected president. And we're going to talk about what's happening now, which is considered a limited hangout. The corporate media and the liberal establishment are trying to convince us that they knew, or some people knew, or that it's a big discovery now that Joe Biden was cognitively impaired for his entire presidency and he really wasn't running the show. So we're going to get into these headlines and more coming up right now in the headline countdown for Thursday, May 15th. All right, we're going to start out with the Associated Press. And this interesting poll, Democrats are deeply pessimistic about the future of their party, an Associated Press NORC poll finds. Now we're going to drill into this, and don't forget that this is the Associated Press. So a new poll conducted earlier this month by the Associated Press, the NORC, Center for Public Affairs Research, found that only 1/3 of Democrats are very optimistic or even somewhat optimistic about their party's future. That's down sharply from July 2024, when about 6 in 10 Democrats said they had a positive outlook. Now, the funny thing about these polls is sometimes is sampling and exactly what questions they ask and whom. So the story goes on to say, I'm not really high on Democrats right now, said poll respondent Damian Williams, a 48-year-old Democrat from Cahokia Heights, Illinois. To me, they're not doing enough to push back against Trump. Again, it's the way they craft this story around the poll. Push back against Trump for what? Trump is actually doing the business of the president, of the administration, of what he was elected to do. That's the whole point. Now, I'm going to get into the whole idea I'm going to push here is that the electorate as a whole has woken up to a bunch of truths, and that once you see the light, it's hard to forget it. And that's the point, is that there's no way to roll back what people have seen or have been enlightened to. And this is the point that the Democrats have. They're trying all these different tactics that have worked before politically, the demonization, the propaganda, and then they follow up with a demonization campaign by running against who they demonize. It's very easy psychologically. But back in the day when I first got interested in politics, the parties were more concerned, and the electorate was more concerned, was what are you going to do to improve the country? Not what are you going to do to improve the standing of my group or improve my life specifically or what have you. What are you going to do to improve the country? And that includes obviously security, economics, etc. Sometimes those two things are interchanged. Article goes on to say the poll finds that about half of the Republicans, 55%, are very somewhat optimistic about their party's future, up from 47% last summer. Still, only about 3 in 10 Republicans are optimistic about the state of politics, up from 1 in 10 last summer. Well, who is this? Who exactly are they talking to? It's obviously, you're talking about establishment Republicans, because the old Republican Party, the neocons, was the country club set. They were rich people looking for lower taxes, regardless of what happened. And then also in that vein of Republicans, the tax dollars or the spending that the federal government did, they wanted spent on the military, where they could get, it's not really a kickback, but they could receive a dividend from the industries they were invested in, the military industrial complex, etc. So sort of like a circle jerk. Neither political party is especially popular right now. Now, the story goes on to say this, but who are they talking to? If you talk to people that are MAGA, and the MAGA is very demonized at this very point in time, but they're not, because the new Republican Party is constitutionalist, libertarian bend of conservatism that are more concerned about their freedoms and the fact that they don't want to waste taxpayer dollars and the Constitution than they are specifically about tax cuts or worried about demonizing social safety net programs, etc. That's why you have a moderate section of people that were deemed as liberal and Democrats, unions, etc., wanting this, because these are pretty popular right now in terms of people wanting to return to good governance that is going to benefit the country overall, what the country stands for, and they believe in doing that, they will benefit as being a citizen of the United States, a taxpayer, etc. All right, let's get to the key fact of the matter that is damaging the Democratic Party right now, and it is Joe Biden solely. Now, why do I say Joe Biden solely? Joe Biden, his election, the people that got him elected, were anti-Trump. The people that supported his election, the people that denied that he was incapable of leading for a variety of different reasons. And the only reason I'm digging into this story, this was a foregone conclusion for most of us, is the reason it's kind of a slow news day, and there is some stuff to report, but this has been reported all week, or actually over the last several weeks, that the limited hangout from establishment media has begun. And this began with the release of several books claiming, in the late term of Joe Biden's presidency, it was clear. It was clear as far back as 2018, 2019, and well documented in 2020. And that's why we had the COVID cover-up, or a number of different factors that pushed Joe Biden over the finish line that would allow the establishment, the Democrats, to cheat to get Joe Biden into office. Okay. Fox News is reporting, CBS News reporter says the Wall Street Journal's courageous 2024 report on Biden's decline should have won the Pulitzer. Jan Crawford praised the Wall Street Journal as the most courageous and deeply sourced original reporting in the past year or years. It's reporting what is already known. Now, the thing about news, if you've ever worked in journalism, and journalism just means to journal. It means to report in the sense of what you witness, you write down, or in the case of photojournalism, you photograph. You take notes about what is happening, and then you report it. What has happened is there was no journaling, there was no journalism done going into COVID, into 2020, about undisputed realities. And I don't want to go on too much of a diatribe here, but I just want to say something I've been discussing friends, family, associates over the past several days, and what it sticks in my craw. The problem is with people's point of view, or POV, is if it does not accept basic reality, basic understood happening, They are not just delusion, they're either uninformed or they're lying. And we're going to use Joe Biden as the vehicle to express this, the Joe Biden's decline. The problem is you see people spitting out opinions all the time, uneducated opinions, or are they lying specifically to forward some sort of agenda? Either or, if you're not going to accept a basic reality, and I say reality and like proven facts, let's take Joe Biden's decline as an example, is they started to attribute it to a stutter. Now, there are two things happening here. They either were in denial, lying to themselves, or specifically lying, disinformation opposed to misinformation. Misinformation means you misinformed. You see something and you interpret it wrong, or somebody tells you something is wrong. Disinformation is you know the truth about the matter and you spread a lie anyway. So you mean to tell me Jan Crawford didn't know or didn't notice Joe Biden's decline? I mean, she's a journalist until 2024's Wall Street Journal article. This is just ridiculous. Now, if you're a journalist, if you want to be informed, you would look at all news sources, regardless of how they may be biased, whether you think they're conservative news outlets or what have you. You don't care. I just want the truth. I don't care if it comes from CNN or The Atlantic. I don't care. Or the Washington Post. If they're reporting the truth and I can be verified, a lot of things can't be verified, so they're left on the shelf there. They're reporting this. You don't know if it's true or not. So the story goes on. Jan Crawford said on X, I remember when people worked hard to discredit these excellent reporters' groundbreaking reporting on Biden's decline, and now everyone agrees they were right all along. Kudos to the New York Post there talking about. This is all late in the game. All right, Joe Biden wasn't fit to serve when he received the nomination from James Clyburn after the South Carolina primary. And don't forget, the Democrats don't care about democracy because they don't care about primaries. They either rig them or overrule them, as they did in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. Now, this is from AMAC. I reported from AMAC yesterday too, and they're doing some decent opinion pieces, etc. So AMAC is like the AARP except conservative. Media shocked that the media covered up Biden's cognitive decline. Since Biden left office, details have slowly emerged about the lengths to which the top White House staff, Democratic siders, liberal media pundits, including Jan Crawford, went to cover up the president's physical deterioration. But that trickle has become a torrent this week as details from Original Sin, President Biden's decline, its cover-up, and its disastrous choice to run again. A new book from CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios' Alex Thompson. So Axios is the CIA. I don't think Jake Tapper is a CIA. I've read some of his books. He's not terrible. I think he's just stupid. I wouldn't consider him an asset of the CIA, but Alex Thompson, yes. And so Alex Thompson, I think, is Jake's handler and how to organize what is a limited hangout. What is a limited hangout? A limited hangout is spy jargon for when the lie, the narrative, the propaganda has been blown and the veil of this false narrative has been stripped away, that instead of admitting to the totality of the lie, you put out little dribbles and drabs to support the newly discovered idea, premise, and that you either put in falsehoods or other truths to try to limit the damage about the discovery of the propaganda, the lie, whatever you were trying to cover up. That's a limited hangout. So that's what's happening now, is they're constructing a limited hangout to throw Joe Biden on the bus, which, I mean, they did obviously during the election, to throw him under the bus. But to limit the damage it's doing to the establishment politically and to the Democratic Party. So you have the National Review reporting, yes, our president was senile for a long stretch. And they report here, I think the single most predictable bombshell of the coming years is that sometime in 2025, someone like Bob Woodward or Robert Costa will publish a book with a title like Perpetual Crisis Inside the Biden White House and then learn something like, you know, and it goes on, the president's health report is this, that. Again, Jill Biden, Ron Klain, and Susan Rice were deeply concerned about the president's health was rapidly declining, but they tried to save him politically, blah, blah, blah. Again, limited hangout. Everybody knew. I knew in 2019 when Joe Biden was in the race. He was certainly a little more with it, but you could already see when he emerged from his basement during COVID that there was something dreadfully wrong. He was inside wearing sunglasses, which was weird. And that his halting speech, which was not a stutter, which was he was having a difficult time reading from a teleprompter. In the midst of all this, they tried to resurrect the Democratic run for the 2024 election. Post-Millennial reports Kamala's aides ran mock soiree ahead of intimate dinner party to train socialization skills. The co-authors, Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper, from the book we just talked about, Original Sin, said that Harris advisors made it a dry run, opting not to serve wine to see if she could practice with a glass or two. In other words, Kamala Harris, which they had to fall back on because Biden's decline was becoming so apparent. Now, either purposely they threw him under the bus or it wasn't really clear exactly how it happened. They obviously sent him out onto the debate stage without his vitamin B shot, or I think it was Adderall they were using with him. But Kamala Harris, who was a lot younger, was no better. So, and she has terrible social skills. And so they were trying to train her ahead and trying to control her like they controlled Joe Biden, which was easier. He was pretty adept at being controlled and he was open to it, certainly. Kamala Harris is arrogant and stupid, which is not a good pairing. And so she refused to train up for shit. She refused to be handled, and so she would go out on her own and keep making mistakes. So from a New York Post article, Alex Thompson and Jake Tapper wrote in The Original Sin to train her for the salon-style dinner that took place at the home of media mogul David Bradley, and no reports of awkward moments at the dinner have emerged, the outlet reported. So they're already covering for her political return by saying, we trained her up and she did good. This is the problem, is that they keep going back to what they're good at. Lying, propaganda, capitalizing on the lie, and then controlling the narrative and the people involved, manipulating those people, whether it's Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or whoever. You know, they put them up there, they control the levers. Brings us to our next article here is opinion piece, the Post and Courier, commentary, the question Democrats won't answer. What are they talking about here? As far back as 2022, Democrats believe Joe Biden should not have run for a second term. Polling at the time continually reinforced that he was a weak candidate and would lose to Trump. Vice President Kamala Harris' numbers were not that better. We know this now, but a lot of people knew it then. And then it talks about Joe Biden Trump being an existential threat. And obviously the Post-Courier is a liberal outfit. And so they're talking about, what are we supposed to do here? And then they go on to say this was about something larger. The favorite question asked Republicans during the last election cycle was whether Biden won in 2020. President Trump and his closest allies announced the election as rigged. Indeed, it was, and the media pounced on those answers. The question might have been about the 2020 election, but it was really dealt with the respecting free and fair elections. Do you respect the legitimacy of our democratic elections? And they're still going with this narrative. Now, this is just a commentary that just was put out now. The fact is, Joe Biden didn't win the 2020 election. He wasn't that popular. He did not garner the most votes of any president in history. He had to beat Trump because Trump had successfully broken voter turnout records and support. So they had to, and they did under the cover of COVID, pad the vote, or actually you can't pad the vote. You actually have to, in real time, inject ballots into the system. But the point wasn't just about the cheat. The point is that the Democratic Party put up a flawed candidate that they painted as a moderate and then made him change his tune and become very progressive once he was elected. But the point was, with all this fanfare about Joe Biden, is that he was already in cognitive decline in 2019 and 2020. And you could see it throughout the campaign when he was giving speeches to Jeeps that were parked there and 6 people in little circles, that he couldn't get the turnout because nobody liked him. And he couldn't articulate a forceful message because he was already senile. PJ Media is reporting short-sighted, long-winded, and perennially clueless. The 2025 Dems are impossible to embarrass. So they're flailing. The Democratic Party, the liberal establishment, not so much the liberal establishment as the Democratic Party is flailing because the truth of the matter has come out, and now the electorate at large, not the blue Kool-Aid drinking liberals who, they won't listen to any truth that is disparaging of their cause, but the moderates, the Republicans that didn't like Trump, the Democrats that, are a little more to the center, that respect at least what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to improve the country, etc. All those people, minorities, young people that the Democrats have relied on, are all gone because they've been enlightened to certain things that it's one thing to lie. It's another thing to perpetuate a lie or a false narrative over time because it makes the lie that more egregious. So the people that realized what many of us had already known, but some of us realized on the debate stage, the question was for the educated voter was, holy shit, the Republicans were right. He is senile. So how long were they lying about his condition? And that was back during the presidential debate in June of last year. So that's what the electorate asked themselves. How long for they? And it becomes more egregious because of the guilt and the thinking that, oh my God, I was duped for how long? Well, shit, Joe Biden was in office for 4 years. Were they lying that whole time? Yes, they were. And that's why the limited hangout comes out and go, oh, we started to notice in 2024. Like halfway through the year when they saw the debate. Well, then it was apparent. But the reality is that we all knew for some time. So now the Democrats, how are they going to get those people back? They never will. If someone lied to you for 4 years, let's say you found out your wife was having an affair for 4 years, not just an affair like she went out one night and hooked up with some guy. she had been having an affair for 4 years, that makes it so much worse that you divorce her. Maybe if she went out and slept with somebody, you might be able to forgive her if it was a one-off. Maybe. But if somebody lies for you for 4 years, so, and then the question is always posed to the thinking individual, what other lies did they tell me? The impeachment of, you could go all the way back into the Trump administration. Did they lie about the impeachments? Did they lie about everything that Trump was doing? They obviously lied about the good people on both sides issue. Many, many other things. That's why Trump won so overwhelmingly that they couldn't even cheat it. So what are they doing? They're flailing, including guys like this guy, this Washington Times. House Democrat delays impeachment push after resistance from colleagues because it's not a winner. Representative Shri Thandadar, Michigan Democrat, was the first to officially file articles of impeachment against the president. But House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, New York Democrat, made it clear earlier this month of his unhappiness. Basically, many of the colleagues decided to force a vote on impeachment today. So they go against him, and actually with some pretty strong language. The Washington Times doesn't publish it. They said Jared Golden, of Maine Democrat, said, I think everyone knows this guy is acting out of self-interest, but really what they were talking about, a lot of the colleagues were saying, using profanity and saying this guy's a fucking idiot, because he's going down the same path that they went down with Trump in his first term. We got to impeach Trump because he's bad. Everybody knows that all was a sham. It's the same thing with the lawfare against Trump. Everybody could see that it was blatantly political. And so now the thing with Biden, with these books coming out, which they think is damage control, is actually making things worse because it's the cherry on top. Now they know that Biden his mental decline was hidden, everybody goes, well, now I know that the lawfare was politically motivated. Now I know the impeachments were also a sham, among other things. And Trump is out there kicking ass. You might not like everything he does, but particularly with the immigration thing, which is widely approved, of closing the border and limiting illegal immigration. So what do the Democrats do? They start defending illegal immigrants, which is the worst thing politically they could have done. It's not like you can't file lawsuits and go defend this guy, but to make it a public thing, a media thing, dumb. Zero Hedge's reporting, a third of Americans worry about manipulated news. Indeed, especially from mainstream news, the corporate media, is because it's all falling apart. People realize that they've been lied to, not just for 4 years, but likely for 8 years. And then the question is, how much longer before that were they lying? As I always say, if you're looking at the news or listening to me, I quote articles here. You can go and try to verify what they're reporting is the best way to do it if you don't believe me. That's your right. But I read everything, and I read, like I said, I read The Atlantic, I read MSNBC, I read the New York Times, I read establishment media, I see what they have to say and how they say it. Because what people say, they always have a point of view that they're expressing that usually is biased. But you want to make sure that the information that you're forming opinions on is as unbiased as possible. So CNBC, Walmart CFO says price hikes from tariffs could start later this month as retailer beats on earnings. So the Walmart CFO is saying that price hikes from tariffs could start later this month. Of course they will. Because Walmart is full of Chinese crap. All their cheap crap, cheap clothing, cheap tchotchkes, cheap furniture, cheap this, cheap. Most of it is manufactured in China. That's why I don't shop there. Or other places like Kmart, and there are other places that use Bangladesh or Vietnam or Vietnam is not as slave labor oriented as China and Bangladesh. And when I mean slave labor, I'm like, okay, you pay somebody $1 a day. Is that, it's slave labor because they can't leave. In a related article from the Wall Street Journal, Walmart is preparing to welcome its next customer, the AI shopping agent. As consumers begin to use AI agents to do their shopping, retailers are trying to figure out how to market to the bots and in addition to humans. Again, everything's becoming more automated. You should be resisting this. I'm not saying AI is bad, and an AI shopping agent certainly isn't as bad as other applications of AI. But Walmart is getting ahead of the game to try to prepare for this. I'll never shop at Walmart. I think I bought, over the last 20 years, I bought one thing at Walmart, one or two things at Walmart that I couldn't find anywhere else. Only because I'm aware of the Waltons, how the Waltons conduct business, etc., and how they treat their employees. It's not a good company. And they sell us cheap shit from China. Who wants it? And it's usually shit you could do without, right? All right, the Federalist. Here are 16 of the most egregious injunctions barring the Trump administration from doing its job. I'm going to go through these very quickly. Macedo versus Trump. All right, the first few of these are about illegal immigration. Community Legal Services versus HHS. Again, this one is about the termination of funding regarding funding for groups that help immigrants. Community Legal Services, this is the same thing. JGG versus Trump. Again, this is the one with U.S. District Court Judge James Boasberg. Again, trying to deport people, so he's stopping the deportations, because all of these are either around transgenderism or deportation. Again, DVD versus DHS. Multiple illegals with final orders for removal sued DHS, challenging the practice. The illegal aliens didn't challenge. Democrat law firms filed for them. National DPS Alliance versus Nome. Again, this is for the Venezuelans that had their protective status removed so they could be deported. Maryland versus the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, this is multiple states sued the administration because they were ending funding that the states were getting. Oh, this was around the funding for terminating employees, federal employees that worked in multiple states. So they were suing Trump, saying he can't fire workers. National Treasury Employee Union versus Trump. The union, NTEU, suing to stop the order, complains that implementing of the order will threaten its very survival. Again, this is the NTEU is the National Treasury Employees Union, because Treasury employees were being fired. Again, the NTEU sued again. Russell Vogt, who's the director of the Office of Management and Budget, because their employees were getting fired. You know, when I got fired, my union didn't help me at all. New York versus Trump. Again, this is when states had funding cuts and termination of employees, government employees. So New York sued him. New York sued Trump again for the same issue. The OMB rescinded the memo. This is not a rescission of the federal funding freeze, simply rescission of the OMB memo. So again, money to federal employees in the state of New York being eliminated. Oh, and a lot of this funding went to, this includes a lot of the USAID, including but not limited to financial assistance for foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, DEI, woke gender ideology, and New Green Deal. So when he stopped the funding for all these things, a lot of this stuff went to the states, and they're suing because they want their money. This is the same. Oh, this is with DACA. This is recognized birthright citizenship. Again, this has to do with illegal aliens, that they're being sued by New Jersey, Washington State, and a nonprofit asylum seeker advocacy project, CASA. And this is USAID, AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition, is suing the U.S. Department of State, who closed USAID because we're sending tons and tons of taxpayer dollars to Africa to fight AIDS. The number 13, the PFLAG versus Trump. Again, this has to do with the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, a gay activism organization, is fighting. I believe it's the U.S. Army, but to block medical institutions from receiving federal research and education grants that perform and cater to transgender ideology. Schilling versus Trump. Again, this is transgender. This is with the military. And 15, Doe versus McHenry, Jones versus Trump, Kingdom versus Trump. Block the federal government from being able to implement the order. The Bureau of Prisons to transfer inmates to the proper prisons aligned with their sex and cease the transgender medical interventions that were receiving U.S. taxpayer dollars and putting biological men in women's prisons. And number 16, the NADOHE versus Trump, California versus U.S. Department of Education. Again, defend women from gender ideology extremism and restore biological truth to the federal government. So as you can see, most of this was related to immigration and then transgender ideology, which as an adult, you can dress however you want, or if you think you're a woman, you could try to be a woman. But the problem is, you shouldn't get federal funding, and federal funding shouldn't go to places that allow biological men into women's spaces, because there's no vote, there's no democracy there, there's no vote by the women that use those spaces to say they want this. You're just saying it can happen. Moving on, the Federalist Democratic election deniers try to overturn election of their own vice party chair. Just like I said, a democracy, democratic process, it's a process. So that's why, how can you support a Democratic Party that will not listen to the voice of the voters who vote for certain candidates in the primary, then they overrule it? So they're not really for democracy. And this instance here with David Hogg, where he was voted in as Democrat vice chair, and then they want to overturn the election results. So just like Bernie Sanders won the Democratic primary both in 2020 and in 2016 because he's very popular, the Democratic Party said, nope, he's not going to be the nominee. Just the News, Wright says DOE, that's the Department of Energy, committed to refilling U.S. oil reserves. Biden depleted, but it could take 6 years. And it won't start until oil prices get lower. So, and they are falling dramatically. And now we have, with Trump's Middle East tour, he's got promises from Qatar and Saudi Arabia to increase production, among other places. Oh, good news. I don't know if you heard about this story. This is from the New York Post. Harvard Russian scientist being held by ICE charged with smuggling frog embryos into the U.S. And the only thing we need to know about this is that they found evidence on her phone that she had discussed with her other scientists in Russia about getting through border control, TSA, etc., with these things that need to be declared, these specimens. And so she just decided not to declare them. They were discovered, and so she's being held, and she should be deported, of course. I mean, you're breaking the law. So you're breaking the law. We're not Democrats here. We're not liberals. We're not saying, oh, you break the law. Oh, there's some underlying cause that I need to be sympathetic for. You broke the law. You want to be sympathetic towards somebody, well, then you could look at the punishment. But they're still going to be punished. Good news from Just the News. Maine Border Patrol arrests for April marked the highest single month arrests in nearly 24 years. So that's at the northern border. So what happened is the southern border is closed to illegal immigration. Illegal immigrants are trying to go through Canada now. Canada is allowing them, and that was part of the sticking point with trade negotiations with Canada. And so Maine Border Patrol are inundated. And so they have the highest arrests, and they're doing good up there, so good. What is a result of this as well, of closing the border and apprehending those crossing the border? Associated Press is reporting U.S. overdose deaths fell 27% last year, the largest one-year decline ever seen. Now, this has to do with last year. Trump wasn't even in office. But what the Democrats were trying to do was trying to stifle border crossings before the election to make it look like they were doing something. But just like Joe Biden's cognitive decline, everybody knew that if you could do this now, how come you didn't do it before? If you hadn't heard, Just the News is reporting Putin will not personally attend Ukraine peace talks with Zelensky and Turkey. It's a security risk. Like I said, with the Ukrainian nationalists there, Putin doesn't want to be assassinated because there have been many assassination bombings, etc. So Putin is worried about his risk, as was Trump, because as I speculated that if Trump and Putin were in the same place, they could easily be taken out. And the New York Post is reporting Trump says he isn't surprised Putin skipped high-stakes Ukraine peace talks, and he knows why. And the reason is that I wasn't planning to go. I would go, but I wasn't planning to go, and I don't think he's going to go if I don't go, because they are really the two principals involved in the Ukraine war. So the two principals have to talk together to resolve the conflict, because America is the strongest member of NATO. It's a NATO war, that the NATO that's backing Ukraine against the Russians. And so the head of, ostensibly, the head of NATO, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin should meet and iron out the details. It's incidental whether Zelensky wants or doesn't want or whatever what is he going to say at a negotiation? I want Crimea. I want the Donbass back. Really, how? What's your leverage? CNN reports Trump's embrace of Syria and its jihadist-turned president could shake up the Middle East. And so finally, CNN is reporting that it's really the jihadists that took over Syria, backed by the CIA, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. I think it was a risk, but a smart move on Trump's part to meet with the guy. He's pushing for peace with Israel. But the fact is, you have to realize is that, it's Islamists that have taken over Syria. So This is exactly what they did during the Arab Spring over 10 years ago. And we saw what happened when the jihadists, the Islamists, took over places like Egypt and Tunisia, et cetera, et cetera. And we saw this in Syria. They go after the religious minorities and homosexuals. Speaking of bigotedness, Zero Hedges reporting racism is only white. Anti-white art installation goes viral, sparks outrage. A number of anti-white slogans were used in the installation at the University of Grenoble in France for Equality Month, with widespread outrage leading to the president of the university demand they be taken down. And I'm just going to show what some of the inscriptions were. The world is in pain. That's normal. It's ruled by white men. Who are these people? Earth is monochrome like a rainbow. Racism is only white. All right, first of all, monochrome means one color. Like sepia is monochrome. So monochrome is not like a rainbow. It's the opposite. And then it has a couple other that are irrelevant. But it's like, I thought these people were in university. Very strange. Well, they're delusional. As I said, it's only the far left progressives that have been deluded into accepting everything that's spit out from the liberal establishment and the corporate media, and that have been the perfect minions to wage a new socialist, a postmodern socialist revolution, not necessarily against, the poor against the rich, so to speak, but divisive infighting among different disparate groups. Everyone's being oppressed. The trans people are being oppressed. The LGBTQ are being oppressed, and the blacks are being oppressed, and, it's all the white people, and which isn't really the case. So the Federalist is reporting delusional leftist compared judge indicted for helping illegal evade arrest to Harriet Tubman. Was it really Harriet Tubman? No, not so much as it was Sherman Booth, an abolitionist newspaper editor, fired up a crowd outside a Milwaukee jail in 1854, where Joshua Glover, a fugitive slave, was being held. The crowd stormed the jail and helped Glover escape to Canada, where he lived the rest of his life as a free man. But as the article from the Federalist says, Dugan isn't Booth, and Flores Ruiz is no Joshua Glover. The illegal immigrant wasn't born a slave. He didn't escape human bondage. He left Mexico several years ago and entered the United States illegally. These delusional comparisons on the left just show that they're not thinking clearly. The same reason they accepted Joe Biden as the president and said he's a good president, when they're not even following what the fuck was happening. I mean, there's 20% inflation. Yeah, he's a good president. And they don't even know how inflation happens. If they listen to the Federal Reserve, they think it's because of taxes and tariffs and all these other things, when it's expansionary monetary policy. All right, I want to go to this One American News article. Carmelo Anthony, teen accused of stabbing Austin Metcalf, will graduate from the high school despite murder charge, which is ridiculous. But the reason I went to the article here is if you didn't know exactly what happened and there was some discrepancy, Metcalf, a Memorial High School junior, requested Anthony, a Sentinel High School student, to move from underneath his school's pop-up tent during a rain delay, and Anthony refused, according to the arrest report. Anthony then unzipped the bag, reached inside, and told Metcalf, "Touch me and see what happens," a witness told police. According to the authorities, Metcalf then grabbed Anthony to tell him to move, and Anthony pulled out a black knife and stabbed Austin once in the chest, presumably the heart. And Anthony said, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Anthony confessed to police as he was being taken into custody. According to the arrest report, "I was protecting him myself. He put his hands on me." And just like most blacks that don't understand the law, that's assault. If someone touches you, sure, it's assault. but it's not deadly assault. So you might be threatened with violence, but the inappropriate response of stabbing somebody in the heart, you're still going to get charged with murder. So I don't even care if the guy was racist and said something racist to you and then grabbed you. He didn't punch you. And if somebody, even if they punched you, you wouldn't have the right to stab them in the chest. Now, if they were punching you repeatedly and you were afraid you were going to be killed, and you can be killed by being pummeled or brain damage or whatever, and you use deadly force, that's a different situation. But because someone grabs you or touches you, that is no justification for deadly force, particularly using a weapon. You know what I mean? Like if you have karate or something and the guy grabs you and you go to hit him or something and you collapse his trachea and he chokes to death, that's different than taking a knife out of your backpack and stabbing somebody. But the reason shit like this happens is because everybody's worried about the evil white man is trying to oppress you and all this shit. And maybe the guy was worried that this track star is going to take him out and lynch him or something. It's just ridiculous. First of all, Anthony was in the wrong. He was under the tent of another school, right? That tent was for their athletes. If your school didn't bring a tent, well, fuck off. Now, is it wrong to try to remove somebody maybe, whatever. But it still doesn't warrant deadly force. It's the same thing with police. And police have the right to use deadly force. Citizens don't. I mean, depending on the circumstance, I imagine, and depending on the state. Like I had to explain to my brother that, can't do that. Oh, I got to move quickly now. I'm getting really delayed here. All right, ISIS attack thwarted at Michigan Army facility near Detroit. Former National Guard member Amar Abjud Mohammed said 19 was arrested by FBI. It was sort of a sting. Well, he's going to shoot up the training center. Post-millennial conservative cable news outlet OAN signs multi-year deal with Spectrum TV. Good. Because the network was kicked off of all cable networks, following January 6th. National Review small business grants across federal government vulnerable to Chinese influence. Small business innovation and technology grants from federal agencies remain vulnerable to infiltration by Chinese government actors intent on stealing U.S. taxpayer-funded research. Washington Post is telegraphing here, much of the U.S. at heightened risk of summer power outages this summer. So they're planning a summer of rage. There will be hack attacks on the grid, how they present it, how the narrative, but they're telegraphing here that's going to happen this summer. And they're going to try to launch another summer of rage. We've seen that happening. And National Review, Jim Banks introduces bill to prevent Chinese military from acquiring U.S. sensitive technology. Senator Jim Banks, a Republican of Indiana, is introducing legislation Thursday to prevent federally funded U.S. research from being shared with or conducted alongside Chinese entities tied to the Chinese Communist Party's civil military fusion strategy. Well, that's not. We've been doing research with these people for some time. I mean, that's the problem. That's what I don't understand. It's like we were doing COVID gain of function research with the Chinese at Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Why? Who knows? All right. It's about time to end it there. I had to zip through those last couple, so excuse me for moving a little hastily. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to that trick. Sorry I didn't get an episode of Tuesdays with Terry up last night. I thought we were going to get together. We couldn't do it on Tuesday. We thought maybe Wednesday, but we're going to have to wait till next week. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live on Rumble at 10 a.m. Sometimes simulcast to YouTube. I am disbanding my libbop.org website, that introduction to libertarian populism. I just can't afford it going on any longer. So sorry about that. So I'll talking about that the next month or so as that site comes down. All right. Thanks for joining me today. I will see you tomorrow. Respect.
This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order. The New World Order.
I'm an American. I have rights.
I kill you.